I'm Michael Bungay Stania. This is Change Signal. This is the podcast where we cut through the blather, the BS, and the noise to find the good stuff that works in change. If you are a transformational leader and you're afraid of becoming the tin man of change and starting to rust, well, this is the podcast where you'll find the lubrication you need. That is a slightly painful metaphor, but it will make sense, I promise. As I consider the guests I've had on the show, well, look, some of them are practitioners, some of them are thought leaders, and some of them are academics. Occasionally you get a blend, and some of them are two of the three, but it's really rare that I get somebody who can stand credibly in all three of these spheres of expertise. I mean, how many people do you know who have a PhD in complexity and uncertainty, who's working for one of the top 5 biggest organizations in the world, who's put out a terrific book on change, and who has some pretty definite points of view about how to lead change?
Add a bit of humor, listen to the people, get more into a coaching mindset. Take this pressure off of having to drive the change. You don't. But taking a step back, taking a deep breath and going, where can I help others to drive the change? How can I let them shine? And that's a much more comfortable and enjoyable way of doing that and doing it continuously.
Well, look, Jana Werner is that person. Her wonderful new book is called The Octopus Organization, a guide to thriving in a world of continuous transformation. And it's actually where that Tin Man metaphor comes from the introduction. She's an executive at Amazon Web Services, and I know this is going to be a great conversation. Jana, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me and for this awesome setup.
Well, thank you. Hey, look, what most frustrates you about the old school approach to change and transformation? What gets under your skin?
So I have to admit I have led some of those because I didn't know any better. That first of all frustrates me, of course, that I did that. What frustrates me about it is that we have these wonderful, smart, intelligent people that we try so hard to hire and that we pay a lot of money as well and that we want to do their best job. But then we go in and we tell them how to operate. And when we think it doesn't work, we also tell them how to change how they should operate.
Right.
And we often do it in a top-down way. We do it to them instead of with them. And we lose all this intelligence, that ambition, that desire, that hunger, that curiosity. And that is just such a shame.
Yeah, it's a dehumanizing effect and experience, not to mention what you lose by not engaging those whole people. I mean, I think this is a common refrain amongst thoughtful transformational leaders, which is do change with people, not change to people. But that's so hard because, it's like I am on board in theory, but as soon as I'm doing it in practice, I'm dealing with these people with their own opinions, their own sense of what they should be doing, their unwillingness to take direction from me and not being able to read my mind. What do I need to unlearn to start this shift from doing change to people to doing change with people?
This is a brilliant observation. And when I was young and impatient and outcomes focused, I felt the same way, that it's actually faster to just come up with a plan, tell everyone what to do and get it done. I've learned over time and also having children actually that might feel faster in the beginning, but it's actually overall less effective and less successful and therefore less fast because you do something that isn't effective and that doesn't stick. What I do find is that it's harder to do in the beginning when you have to corral people. You have to create a purpose that people really can buy into. And you have to have these conversations and take the patience and learn what's on people's minds. But those leaders that do that well, that build these kind of coalitions and that create a vision and that drive the inner excitement of people and take the time to build trust, to bring them on board, to be vulnerable and acknowledge errors, they actually then drive more sustainable and also transformation that then can build and build and build instead of doing one thing faster and slowing down. And unlearning has a lot to unlearn. I had to unlearn to try and have the answers and to ask such questions that I would on the one hand learn, but that my questions would also coach people.
Right.
I had to learn that often you can't go with your head straight through the wall, that there's a beeline journey, but on that beeline journey, you pick up a lot more people, and then actually that builds some sort of momentum and excitement.
There's a lot here.
Yeah.
You talk about this metaphor of being the architect of the change.
Yeah.
And I think this is a powerful metaphor. I think I first read it with Peter Block using it in one of his earlier books. But an architect actually, like, they have pretty precise blueprints. They're like, actually, point. It's build it like this, the wall should be this thick, this is that. I might trust you to build it, but I'm actually giving you a very precise plan on how to do it. So how are you using this metaphor of being an architect?
Actually, I feel like you've made an excellent point here. Can we change from architect to engineer?
I love that.
Because if you're an engineer, you're curious, you see what materials there are, you try things, you see what works.
Right.
You bring theory with practice together. So thank you for raising that. Maybe we should switch to an engineer.
I'm sorry. Look, as an author of books myself, I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to go rewrite that bit of my book. So apologies for doing that.
No, I think this is wonderful. I like learning. Thank you.
Okay, so with the metaphor of the engineer, one of the things that you're pointing to is a capacity to try some stuff out. You're bringing together theory and practice and running small experiments.
Yeah.
I think this idea of running small experiments is something that is getting more and more traction in the world of change and transformation. But the challenge with experiments is they will typically fail, or they'll often fail. How would you coach me to build my capacity for failure?
I do a lot of work with big companies right now. Actually, the more stressed they are, the more they get backed into a corner from boards, from investors, from shareholders, etc., the less they allow experimentation is what I see again and again. It still hasn't permeated traditional organizations. That's the first thing I would like to say.
Yeah.
And I keep working with boards to say, your intuitive action to hunker down and only allow 2 or 3 things that then become so big that the board supports them and they are no longer experiments, they are done deals and things everyone has to deliver, is counterintuitive to what you should be doing when things are getting difficult. You have to allow this experimenting. And in terms of failure, that's a tough one. I was raised quite competitively and having to show success. And in my career, even from a school child on, we know that failure is personally painful and shameful. So I loved turning to science to say, it's not me, I am not doing something. I have a hypothesis and I test it.
Right.
And it might be right or it might be wrong. And I can test it. And whatever happens, I will learn something. I will challenge assumptions. I will challenge my beliefs. And the next thing will come from this. But I can't do this alone. If I have bosses and peers where there is no comfort in this, what you could call failure, but I'd rather call it learning, then it's difficult, even if you yourself change your own mindset. It needs people around you and leaders to support this.
So honestly, I read your book and I just spent most of the pages violently agreeing with you on all of this stuff.
Thank you.
So I'm a fan of your insights. But with many organizations, and you've alluded to this yourself, which is big companies have old ways of doing things under pressure, where everything feels like it's more urgent and needs to go faster. The individual and collective amygdala gets fired up and it's fight or flight, and it's like no capacity or reduced capacity for ambiguity and experiment.
Yeah.
If I'm somebody responsible for change in an organization like this, where do I start, Jana? I mean, or is it just like, look, the system's too big and too set against me. It's time to find another job.
No, don't do that. There can become points in life where that happens, and it has happened to me and to some of my colleagues, but don't give up straight away. I think what's key is trying to dive back into 2 or 3 key things and taking a step back to say, yes, there's a lot to do, but what are 2 or 3 things I'm going to focus my attention on now? And how do I know very quickly if they are still worth doing and if my attention has paid off, or if I should either stop them, pivot, or double down on them? So what's the fastest way to find out? Annie Duke, the most successful female poker player in the world, who's got a PhD in decision sciences, taught us about quit criteria, set them at the start, do less, prioritize 2 or 3 things.
Quit criteria is pretty self-explanatory, but just in case, it's deciding ahead of time when to walk away rather than needing to negotiate that and figure that out with yourself in the middle of the stress of something. You're making the decision, you're setting the criteria when you've got time and space and capacity, and then you either go or you don't go, depending on the data in the moment.
And then not just trying to do it yourself, but seeing who's really good at these things, who's also fired up. Like, what does your colleagues or your team's body language tell you? What are they excited about? What do they think you shouldn't be doing? Most people that you work with in your organization are closer to the work, to the problems. Just trust them more and rely on what should we stop doing? Where should we double down on?
Yeah. Jana, you're touching on a number of the anti-patterns that you list in the book, and you've got 36 in total. If you had to pick one of your 36 anti-patterns that you feel is underappreciated or doesn't get the love that it should, where would you take us?
Yeah, there's loads. So basically, my colleague and I, we looked at these traditional organizations and the way they operate and the way you try to change them when they now hit AI and the volatile world.
Yes.
They hit all these anti-patterns. We described them a bit like conditioned things people go to because they kind of work, but we know they don't work well.
Right.
There's anti-patterns, anything from using jargon because you've simply learned to use it, but then it doesn't build trust or gets people scared.
Right.
Abusing principles where like some leader introduces 10 new leadership principles. Now let's all use them. And in the end, they just make it to some website or a Christmas card and that's it.
Yes.
And so lots and lots of anti-patterns. And one that I really like and that we don't talk so often about is incentives. Incentives are a really strong tool that help you create clarity, what's valued. But there's a bit of a catch because often we conflate incentives with rewards. So incentives are forward-looking, like bonuses. They can end up feeling coercive, like carrots, and they can promote short-termism. They can trigger even unethical gaming. You all know this famous sentence from Peter Drucker. If I give someone a goal, they will achieve it even at the detriment of the business.
Yeah.
And then there's this wonderful thing that's underused, which is retrospective, and that's rewards. It's more like trophies, like they reinforce ownership. And we talk a lot about how you can distribute ownership in your organization.
Right.
And that's the difference between doing a task for a payout or owning a result for pride of the mission. For example, things like a reward can be a researcher at the end. For example, Thomson Reuters also gets to register a patent, or someone gets to stand up as an engineer and say, I have solved a data challenge. Here's how I solved it. I'm proud to show you so you can learn from me. This is all about how can we look less at these incentives and more at this proliferation of opportunities you have for rewards? There are so many things people can do. Peer recognition budgets, broadcasting rewards, all kinds of things. And they tap into this innate need of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, as Daniel Pink would write. So it brings out the best in us. And I would love this anti-pattern of incentive focus to turn a bid more to reward.
In your book, The Octopus Organization, the 36 anti-patterns, which we've dug into one of them there, are clustered into three groups. There's clarity, there's ownership, and there's curiosity.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the temptation is to go on curiosity because that's the thing I've been banging on about for 25 years. It's like, how do you help people stay curious longer? But the thing I've been wrestling with most when I've been talking and thinking about change and transformation is ownership. Or specifically, the way I put it is like agency. How do I increase a sense of agency within an organization? And it's quite hard just to say to somebody, I'm giving you agency now, because it's almost a contradiction in terms. What have you learned about how best to invite people to assume and take on increased ownership or increased agency if they're the same thing?
It's a challenging thing. Yeah, we use the word ownership, but it's in this kind of realm that you talk about. We describe it as responsibility plus authorship. Agency is a word that is used a lot. The old word used to be someone taking initiative. So it's all in that similar space.
Yep.
It's a really funny one. And I worked in highly regulated, very hierarchical, top-down industries as well that I try to transform. Ownership is difficult because you need to want to take it, but as leaders, you also need to want to give it.
So just note that it is a two-sided thing. And I'm stopping us here because I suspect most of us have a bias towards just one of those sides. But you need to figure out, how do you help people want to give it, and how do you help people want to take it? Both are hard, and both are necessary.
Sometimes there's no upside in taking ownership, because the first time you make a decision that's considered wrong or you make a mistake, it can have, as I learned in the English language, career-limiting effects. So,
That's it.
and also many leaders, and I have to include myself when I was younger, a long time ago, wouldn't want to give it because I was worried people might not do exactly how I want things done. Or what if I get into trouble? What if I prove that I'm obsolete? So it's a very,
Right.
very kind of a sensitive topic. I've had the conversation with the COO of an investment bank, and she said, my people don't want to take ownership. They want processes, they want rules. And it took me half an hour of a coaching conversation to get her to realize that her people had no upside to take ownership.
Right.
And we hear the story again and again. You fill a company with processes, and people become process followers. You almost unlearn to take ownership and to have agency.
It's a provocative question, isn't it? How have we trained our people out of taking ownership?
And it's not rewarded. So how do you go about it? It needs to be given. It can't be taken back the first time that someone makes what we consider as leaders a mistake. There can be humor involved in this. I had to humorously at some point ask some of my people to scratch their ear or laugh at me in a meeting secretly when they saw that I was micromanaging again, and we could laugh.
Right.
I could start to learn to laugh about myself that I did it.
Yes.
So you need to get to a place where a leader gets curious and is happy to say, help me, I'm not even noticing I'm doing it. And leaders who want this in their organizations need to build a psychological safety. And there's so many misunderstandings about psychological safety. But all of that needs the framing of clarity. That's our first kind of bucket. If people don't understand what is the purpose of the organization, what are the values against which I operate, what are the few priorities, what does success look like, basically creating this context for decentralized action. Which problems are worth solving?
I love that.
If you don't have that, then it's very hard to take ownership. That's why we start with clarity. And based on that clarity, you can give ownership and you can also take ownership.
I love what you said. It's very insightful around.
Thank you.
It's not just people needing it to feel safe and clear enough for them to claim, to pick up what's on the ground, the opportunity for ownership and agency. But the act of that from the leader is often one that is a loss for them. They lose control, they lose status, they lose clarity because suddenly the other person's going to be doing it and what's going to happen over there. As you've worked with senior people, how have you helped them loosen their grip?
It's coaching. I ask them what the worry is, what's the fear, and then you dive into that fear. So people who feel they're obsolete, you can often get them to a coaching conversation that says, you don't even want to be doing what you're doing every day. It's simply what you're used to. Once you don't do this anymore, you can take a step back and think about how to model and reform the broader organization and the people that help them to be their best selves.
Right.
If it's a worry about how work gets done, you can help them and coach them through to say, do 2 or 3 parallel experiments. Try and push through that moment of discomfort when people come back with something you did not like.
Yes.
Ask open questions with genuine curiosity, not leading questions, genuinely with curiosity. And then they learn that come these moments of surprise. They go, I didn't think about that. I didn't think of solving it like that. And once they start to get some positive experiences, this real positive reward system sets in and people feel a bit safer of starting to do it. And then all these beautiful chemicals set in. You replace the short dopamine hit of something being done with oxytocin, with serotonin, with things like pride about the people that you support and that blossom when they work with you. And that is a feeling. Once a leader has had that, you kind of get addicted to that. And that's when you're over the hump of becoming more of an octopus leader.
The best place to go for more on Jana and her work is theoctopusorganization.com. And that book, The Octopus Organization, is findable in all the usual places. One of the things that I notice when I see change attempting to happen in an organization is there's so much other stuff going on that
Uh-huh.
there's no capacity to absorb change. It's like pouring water into a full glass. I mean, I've seen statistics that say, 10 years ago, an employee might experience 2 changes in a year. Now it's up to 10 changes in a year. And really, it's moved from being, hey, let's do a change initiative, just to being everything is in a state of flux. Everything is an ongoing process of change. Do you have any insight on how to increase capacity so people just have room enough to do some of these things that you're talking about?
Yeah, I've seen it and I've done it, and I've done it to people, unfortunately, where you're at a change program and they call it side of desk. So I added,
Right.
there's no more side on my desk. My desk is full. So, when you have to add change on top of what you're doing, it doesn't work because most people are madly busy. But we're also busy with crazy things. We're busy
Yeah.
with tackling bureaucracy. We're busy with pet projects we shouldn't be doing. We are busy with gates and sign-offs and gatekeepers. So a lot of the work we do isn't actually productive. So
Right.
many of the anti-patterns in the book talk about what can you take away? And we keep encouraging a subtractive mindset. So what can go? What sign-offs do you no longer need? What processes are just there because one person made a mistake and now 1,000 get penalized and have built up that nobody even knows anymore why the process is there?
Right.
I worked with a company that had 400 transformation priorities. No chance. The word priorities in the 1900s was singular.
Yeah,
There were no,
exactly.
So we
Yeah.
write a lot about what can you take away from all this overhead in the silos, dependency management, waiting for people. There's so many things that you can try and remove to free people up to focus on less things. And then when they do, the change can and shouldn't be separate.
Right. So the change is woven into the work. It's not a kind of a bolted onto the work.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a tough question to answer, but what it brings to mind is the Clayton Christensen idea of the innovator's dilemma.
Yes.
Which is like, oh, no, I see what we need to be doing differently. But you know what? We're making too much money. We've got too many established legacy systems and processes, both explicit and implicit. In theory, I get this, but in practice, I can't shrink the status quo. And the status quo has a weight and a gravity and a kind of grabbiness that is very hard to escape from. How do I shrink some of that stuff? I mean, it's all very well to do a kind of like Leidy Klotz, his idea of subtraction. And I'm like, I love that. But
Same.
the status quo is just stubborn. How do I shrink some of that?
It is. And there's no super easy answer, but I do believe, and I really do, the older I get, the more I believe in this, where there's a will, there's a way. So it needs to start with a desire, and then it needs to move into a bit of courage.
Nice.
And that courage needs to be, what can we try? Like the idea of we borrow things like from Reed Hastings' Netflix. I pride myself not making a single decision for an entire quarter. Just ask a leader, can you go 2 days without making a decision that you should no longer be making? And then once you've done that, you start tiny, 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 and then you go bigger and bigger, and suddenly that brain of the leader gets freed up for other things. Or there's one gatekeeping approval that keeps happening that really doesn't help. Can you remove it? Can you automate it? Can you just get rid of it? We talk about doing really, really small things. Start with tiny things that are achievable. And that creates a momentum, or as Amazonians, we call it flywheel effects, where you then do more and more and more. So the idea is to train a habit of how you do change.
One of the things I like about your focus on the word habit here is habits are actually quite specific. They're really small.
Yes.
And earlier on, you talked about the danger of a initiative almost becoming too much. It becomes the 2 or 3 big things from the board, and now everyone's like, well, that's all we've got to do now, and it kind of becomes a self-defeating kind of lump of lead.
Exactly.
Is there a danger of transformational change initiatives becoming too big? And if that's happening, is there a way that you can mitigate the risk of that?
Yes, there is always a danger. And I think there's very few situations where you should have massive organizational change initiative, like when you have to do a turnaround, when the company's back is against the wall. then maybe you do massive transformational change. Other than that, we both think this word is overused, the T word, to the point that even the T on my laptop keyboard fell off. And no, but jokes aside, we really believe much more in this continuous small changes that everybody does, where you set the context and people continuously look in their center of expertise, where they work, where they know how the work gets done, which most leaders don't know about their teams, let alone the teams who sit underneath those teams, if you want to think of a top-down hierarchy. Then those people continuously having some space to adjust what they do, to try something different, to be curious. That to me is the key. I don't think you should have large change programs. And if you do, I think they need to be really well explained. There needs to be over and over communication of why, which often is missing.
Right.
And there needs to be feedback loops through the organization of doing them. And there needs to be not the heroic thing where some leader gets a promotion or a bonus for being the superhero that rips the organization or wires the organization with TNT and pulls the plunger. That ends up in usually years of trying to rebuild.
Right, and trauma for everybody involved.
Trauma, massive trauma.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about this, like, if there's a purpose that needs to be repeated endlessly. That wonderful quote, the problem with communication is the illusion that's taken place.
Yes, I like that.
What can you teach us about the difference between a typical and a terrific sense of purpose for an organization?
It's a difference of day and night. We learned from Daniel Coyle in the Culture Code that 64% of execs believe their employees knew what the purpose or the point was of the company. But then when the people got asked about purpose statements, in truth, 2% knew what was going on.
I'm surprised it was that high.
I know. Everyone comes to work and has no clue what they're doing. And then we even found studies that say 52% of leaders acknowledged their purpose was more of a brand and marketing plan than something useful. So our point is purpose, it needs to be meaningful. It needs to be long-lived. And as Sinek would call it, a just cause, like a noble reason for existing. People don't buy what you do, but why you do it, as Simon Sinek says. And this is the starting point of clarity that you have to create as a pre-function of ownership. It's this famous story of the NASA janitor that was asked by JFK, what is he doing sweeping the floors? And he says, I'm putting a man on the moon. So everything leads back to this one purpose. IKEA, for example, goes where create a better life for the many people. And that explains why they're there, who they serve. They have this origin story of affordable products for people who used to only inherit their furniture, and they kept the delivery and building in-house. Amazon says we want to be the most customer-centric company on earth. And when I have a choice how to act when I work with a customer, I go back to this purpose statement and I make the right choice to work to the best thing for the customer. So I'm very passionate about purpose. If that is right, you have a really good starting point.
For the sake of what exactly are we doing all this hard work of change and transformation? How compelling is the call you and your leadership team are making? Is this indeed a bold quest? My bold quest for this pod is to be the go-to resource for transformational leaders like you. And you can help that, of course, by spreading the word. A review? Wonderful. A shout out on LinkedIn? Perfect. Please tag me. A recommendation to a colleague? Priceless. There's also more at thechangesignal.com. Thanks for doing the work. I'm glad you're here.